It had been a quiet rainy morning in Devon when Elena Thornwell turned 25. The sky hung low over the countryside like a damp woolen blanket, and the silence in the old family manor was only broken by the distant chime of the grandfather clock in the hall. She had not expected a party. She hadn't even expected a visit. But there, standing in the threshold with an umbrella dripping on the stone floor, was Madeline. Her older sister, perfectly polished in a beige trench coat and red lipstick, smiled as though nothing had ever gone wrong between them. "Happy birthday, Elena," Madeline said, voice clipped and cool. "I brought you something from Gran's attic. Thought you might appreciate a bit of family history." From the car boot, she retrieved a rectangular bundle wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. It smelled of mildew and age, like forgotten things. Elena accepted it hesitantly. "A painting," Madeline offered. "It's not worth anything, of course. But perhaps it'll give you perspective." There was something about the way she said it. Casual, but with that glint in her eye Elena remembered from childhood, when Madeline had broken her favorite doll and pretended it had fallen on its own. Elena brought the bundle into the drawing room, away from Madeline's watchful gaze. She untied the twine, peeled back the layers and stared. It was a portrait. A woman in a navy dress stood facing forward, but where her face should have been, there was only a blur. Not smudged. Not unfinished. Just blank. As if someone had deliberately removed her identity. Beneath the canvas, in tiny letters, was a signature. A. Thornwell. 1946. Their great-grandfather. The reclusive artist. The same one who'd mysteriously vanished after the war. Elena sat down slowly. Her fingers traced the edge of the frame. She'd never seen this painting before. And yet something about it felt familiar. She glanced over her shoulder. Madeline was still in the foyer, inspecting her nails. Why would she give this? And why now? Later that night, alone in her room, Elena lit a single candle and examined the painting under its flickering light. The blank face haunted her. But more than that, there was something beneath the paint. A shimmer. Barely visible. Almost like hidden writing. She leaned closer, heart suddenly racing. And then she saw it. Just under the neckline of the dress, in the shadows of the brushwork, a faint swirl. Letters. Not random strokes. A message. Half covered by decades of dust and time. She didn't understand it yet. But someone wanted this woman erased. And Madeline had made sure the painting ended up in her hands. The days that followed were restless. Elena couldn't shake the image of the faceless woman from her mind. Each time she tried to focus on her freelance design work, her gaze would drift to the corner of the drawing room, where the portrait leaned silently against the wall. It was as if the painting had a pulse of its own, drawing her closer, whispering secrets just out of reach. She tried to ignore it. She even covered it with an old sheet. But at night, when the manor grew still and the wind scratched at the windows like brittle fingers, she found herself returning to it. The candlelight revealed more swirls, more brushstrokes that did not belong to the original painting. She needed answers. And there was only one person left in the family who might know something. Her great-aunt Iris. Iris Thornwell was the last surviving sister of their grandfather. She lived alone in a crumbling cottage on the outskirts of Tavistock, and hadn't spoken to the rest of the family in years. According to Madeline, she had gone a bit mad with age, always muttering about shadows and voices in the walls. But Elena had no other leads. She called ahead, though Iris didn't pick up. So the next morning, with the painting wrapped carefully in a blanket, she drove through the misty moorlands toward the cottage. The door creaked open before she could even knock. "Elena," said a voice from the darkness. "I knew you'd come." The woman who stood there was small and wiry, with wild gray curls and eyes sharp as pins. Her house smelled of lavender and dust, and every surface was covered in papers, books, or trinkets from another era. Iris led her into the parlor without another word, as if expecting her for years. "I found a painting," Elena said, unwrapping the bundle and placing it on a wooden easel. It was in Gran's attic. It's signed by Augustus Thornwell. There's something hidden in the layers. Do you know who she is? Iris stared at it for a long while. Then she whispered, "She was never meant to be remembered." Elena froze. "What do you mean?" Iris didn't answer at first. She walked slowly to the fireplace and pulled a dusty ledger from the mantel. Inside were sketches, dates, names. She flipped to a page marked Autumn, 1946. She was called Evelyn. A muse. A ghost. Augustus painted her obsessively after the war. Said she saved him. Said she haunted him. Why is her face missing? Because your grandfather made a deal, Iris said, voice trembling now. He tried to immortalize her. But some stories aren't meant to live forever. And some truths, her eyes met Elena's, destroy what little piece of soul has left. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled louder. Iris reached out and gently traced the corner of the canvas. You shouldn't have brought her back into the light. But why would Madeline give this to me? Elena asked, gripping her coat. She must have known. Iris chuckled bitterly. Madeline always believed the story was a myth. But she found the painting, didn't she? And gave it to you. That's no accident. Elena felt cold all over. As she gathered her things to leave, Iris grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. There are names that should never be spoken. If the paint is coming undone, it means the memory is waking. Be careful. Elena. Some legacies are cursed not because of what they hold, but because of what they reveal. That night, Elena dreamt of a woman in blue, standing at the edge of a lake. The water was still. The woman turned slowly. Where her face should be, only shadow. And in the distance, a voice called her name. Elena barely slept that night. The dream had left her shaken, a woman without a face, a name whispered through shadows. The morning light filtered weakly through the curtains of the old manor, but it did little to lift the chill that clung to her skin. She found herself in the drawing room again, staring at the painting. Only now, it had changed. Slightly. There was the faint suggestion of an outline, a cheekbone perhaps, a hint of an eye. It was as though the painting had started to reveal itself, like the layers of time were peeling back without her touch. Her fingers trembled. She backed away and called Madeline. But no answer. Elena decided to visit the local gallery, where many of Augustus Thornwell's pieces were archived. She needed to know if there were other portraits of this woman. She needed to understand what was happening. The curator, a quiet man named Theo Barnes, greeted her with reserved curiosity. Ah, another Thornwell enthusiast. I suppose, Elena replied, lifting her scarf. I'm his great-granddaughter. I found a painting, an unknown work. I was hoping to compare it to others. Theo's expression changed. You don't mean the missing piece, do you? Elena's breath caught. What do you mean? There was a painting, Theo said, lowering his voice. Never publicly shown. Referred to only in private letters. A woman with no name. Most believed it was destroyed. Augustus's assistant burned it, they say, claimed it drove him mad. He led her through a back corridor lined with dim portraits. Each one bore the hallmarks of Thornwell's brilliance. Sharp contrast, haunting realism, and melancholy color. Theo stopped at one canvas. This one, he said. From 1946. Notice anything? The woman in the portrait looked eerily similar. Same delicate build, same haunting blue dress, but her face, while intact, seemed empty. Her eyes were painted in such a way that they looked hollow, like the light in them had been scraped away. Elena whispered. It's her. I thought you said the painting you found was unfinished, Theo said. It was. But it's changing. Theo turned slowly toward her. Paint doesn't move on its own, Miss Thornwell. Elena didn't reply. Instead, she returned to the manor that evening, her thoughts spiraling. She opened old journals from her grandmother's study, hoping to find a name, a letter, anything. And she did. Tucked between the pages of a poetry book was a photograph, faded and cracked. In it stood a young man she recognized instantly as Augustus. And beside him, a woman with pale skin and eyes like glass. She wore the same blue dress. The back read, Evelyn March, Summer 1945. Her heart pounded. That night, Elena returned to the painting again. Candlelight flickered against the wall. And there it was, the eye. One single vividly painted eye now visible on the canvas, watching her. She staggered back, knocking over a vase. The door creaked. Not the front door. The studio door. It had been locked since her arrival. With slow, heavy steps, she approached it. The handle turned with unexpected ease. The room beyond was cold. Far colder than the rest of the house. Dust shimmered in the air, and everything was untouched, as if sealed in time. On the desk, she found a notebook with Augustus's initials. She opened it. Inside were sketches of Evelyn. Dozens of them. Notes scrawled in the margins. She asked me to remember her. The paint does not hold her. Every time I try to finish her face, it returns blank. And at the very bottom. If the eye appears, it means she is almost here. Elena's breath caught. She looked back at the open door, where the hallway stretched into shadow. Something had moved. Elena could hardly breathe. The hallway beyond the studio stretched out before her like a tunnel swallowed by shadow. Something, or someone, had moved just out of view. She stood frozen for a moment, notebook still in her hand, heart pounding against her ribs like a warning drum. She stepped forward. The floorboards groaned beneath her, echoing with each cautious step. Her breath formed pale clouds in the freezing air, though there was no draft, no open window. Only the silence and the tension that clung to every object in the room like a film. Back in the studio, she lit another candle. Then she saw it, on the far wall. A door. Not the main entrance she'd come through, but a smaller panel nearly hidden behind a faded curtain. Elena hadn't noticed it before, not in the dim light or her distracted mind. The curtain moved slightly, swaying though there was no breeze. She pulled it aside. The door was narrow and wooden, with peeling paint and a tarnished handle. Elena hesitated, then pushed it open. A small staircase spiraled downward into darkness. She could smell the must, old wood, dust, and something else, oil paint? The air felt thick. She descended slowly, the candle trembling in her grasp. At the bottom, she found a locked chest. The candlelight glinted off metal hinges. The initials A.T. were carved into the lid. Nearby, on a shelf, lay a rusted iron key. With a shaky breath, she picked it up and turned the lock. The chest creaked open. Inside lay a stack of wrapped canvases, brittle from time and neglect. Elena pulled one out gently, unwrapping it with care. Her breath caught in her throat. It was another portrait. Not of Evelyn, but of a child. A little girl with striking blue eyes and a crooked ribbon in her hair. She looked like a younger version of the woman in the painting upstairs. The next canvas showed Evelyn again. Older, thinner, with sadness etched into her face. And the final one. It showed Evelyn and Augustus together. But they weren't smiling. In fact, Evelyn looked frightened. And Augustus. He looked haunted. At the bottom of the painting, scrawled in rough paint, were the words. I couldn't let her leave. Elena recoiled. A wave of nausea hit her as she backed away from the chest. The candle nearly slipped from her hand. What had her great-grandfather done? She clutched the notebook, flipping through it with desperate fingers. Near the back, a page had been torn out. But the edges left a faint imprint. She took a pencil from the nearby desk and shaded over the torn page. A message revealed itself. She screamed when I painted her eyes. Elena dropped the notebook. Suddenly, upstairs, the sound of glass shattering echoed through the manor. She ran. The studio door had slammed shut. Her candle flickered madly, casting warped shadows across the walls. She burst into the corridor, heart racing, as the cold wrapped around her like fingers clawing at her skin. In the drawing room, the painting had changed again. Now both eyes were there. Painted in haunting detail. Piercing blue, just like in the photos. But more than that. The mouth had started to appear. Slightly parted. As if about to speak. The eyes seemed to follow her. She backed away slowly, her breath shallow and quick. And then the lights flickered. Just once. A whisper. Carried on air that had no origin. Elena. Her name. Spoken in a voice not quite her own. Elena. The whisper echoed, soft but unmistakable, like wind curling around a keyhole. Her feet refused to move, as if the floor itself clung to her shoes. Her name, spoken again, this time closer. Almost inside her mind. The painting loomed larger now. No longer a simple canvas, it exuded something. Presence, awareness, sorrow. The newly painted eyes seemed wet, alive even. The mouth had taken shape in brushstrokes so fine they looked real. Slightly parted lips, with a hint of breath behind them. Elena clutched her pendant instinctively. "Stop it," she whispered to herself. "It's just a painting." But even she didn't believe that anymore. Her fingers trembled as she reached toward it. Not to touch it, she didn't dare, but to inspect the edges, the layers of paint. Her great-grandfather's style had been distinct, broad strokes and thick texture. But this was different. Finer. More recent. Too recent. A cold realization hit her. Someone had added to the painting. Someone, or something. In the silence, another sound emerged. A low, rhythmic tap-tap, like footsteps, but not on the floor. From inside the walls? She turned slowly, her breath shallow. Then her phone rang. The sudden noise shattered the silence. Elena fumbled it from her coat pocket, hand shaking. It was Mara. She answered, voice hushed. "Mara. Elena. Are you still at the manor? I've been researching that painter, Augustus Thorne. You need to hear this." Elena looked at the painting again. "I'm listening." "There were rumors," Mara continued, her voice tight, "about a woman named Evelyn Belmore who went missing in 1911. They said she was last seen sitting for a portrait in this very studio. Some even claimed Augustus kept her locked away. The painting was never sold. It vanished." Elena's knees weakened. "I found it." "You what?" "I found the portrait." And Mara, the eyes weren't there at first. They appeared. And now the mouth. She couldn't say it. It sounded insane. But Mara was silent on the other end, until finally whispering, "It's happening again, isn't it?" Elena didn't know what that meant. Then, faintly, through the phone, came another voice. Not Mara's. A woman's. Distant. Frantic. "He won't let me go." Elena dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, the screen flickering. Her heart pounded as she backed away from the canvas. "No," she whispered. "This isn't real. You're not real." The eyes seemed to narrow slightly. The lips shifted. And then for the first time the painting spoke. Only one word. "Help." Elena screamed and stumbled back, knocking over a stool. The air grew thick, like smoke filling the room. The candlelight dimmed to a sickly blue, casting eerie shadows that stretched and moved unnaturally. From behind the canvas, a knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Like someone trapped, trying to come out. Elena ran to the hallway, slamming the studio door shut behind her. She leaned against it, panting. But the whispers continued. Not from behind the door, but in her head. Her great-grandfather's voice now. Low. Measured. Icy. Art demands sacrifice. Elena did not sleep that night. She sat in the manor's library, the only room that felt less haunted. The fire in the hearth was weak, sputtering like it too feared what lingered beyond the shadows. Her phone was dead. The charger refused to work. Outside, wind screamed through the trees like mourners in a funeral procession. She clutched an old velvet-bound book she had found hidden in a loose floorboard beneath the studio desk. On the cover, gold-embossed initials. E.B. Evelyn Belmore. She opened the first page. The handwriting was elegant, almost musical. December 3, 1910. Mr. Thorne says I have the face of legend, but I fear he sees not me, but what he can make of me. A muse, not a person. Each time I pose, I feel myself disappear more. Elena read feverishly, each entry colder than the last. January 17, 1911. He keeps the studio locked now. I'm told it's for my safety. But whose safety truly? He paints at night. I hear him whisper to the canvas. February 2nd. He says I must never leave until the work is done. I dream of running. I dream of burning the canvas. But I wake and see my eyes in the painting, watching myself sleep. Elena closed the book, her hands numb. It was true. Evelyn had not vanished. She had been kept, confined in that house, captured not just in body, but in paint. Elena! The voice again. But this time, not from the walls. From behind her. She turned. There stood a woman. Draped in gray, face pale and ethereal. Her eyes shimmered with the same haunted depth as the painting. Her mouth trembled as if forming words long suppressed. Evelyn. Elena whispered. The woman nodded slowly. She did not walk. She drifted towards the diary Elena still held. She pointed at it, then toward the stairs. The studio. Finish it, Evelyn mouthed. Elena's lips parted. Finish what? But Evelyn was already fading. Her form blurred like smoke caught in wind. Her voice came last. Or it will begin again. Then, silence. Not just silence. Stillness. The house held its breath. Elena rose, the diary in hand, and walked toward the studio, heart pounding. As she opened the door, the candlelight flickered back to life on its own. The portrait awaited her. Now complete. Every detail, every brushstroke. Perfect. Except her own face stared back. No longer Evelyn Belmore, but Elena Thorne. Her. Trapped behind oil and canvas. Elena stumbled back from the easel, heart racing as though she'd sprinted miles. The canvas was unmistakable. Her face, perfectly rendered. Her eyes, her soul, captured in paint with terrifying clarity. It was as if the painting breathed, as if it watched. She tried to rip it from the wall, but the moment her fingers touched the frame, her body locked. Her muscles seized, her breath froze. Voices surged in her ears, whispers, hundreds of them, each one echoing her name. Elena! 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 The diary fell to the ground with a thud. The candlelight dimmed. In its glow, shadows began to stretch unnaturally along the walls, forming the shapes of women. Dozens. Hundreds. All trapped in paint. Evelyn hadn't been the first. And Elena might not be the last. A cold gust swept the room, flipping pages of the diary on the floor. One page tore free, fluttering toward her. It caught against her leg. She picked it up. March 19, 1911. He paints not what he sees, but what he can own. We are muses only until he claims our essence. My soul is almost gone. I can feel it clinging to the canvas. If anyone reads this, destroy it. Burn the studio. Let Belmore House collapse upon its cursed heart. Elena stared at the page. Burn the studio. She looked around. The candlelight still flickered, and nearby, a rusted oil lamp rested beside a stack of rags and turpentine jars. The scent was thick, flammable, dangerous. She hesitated. One spark, and the entire studio would go up in flames. But wasn't that the point? She gathered the rags, doused them in turpentine, and set them beneath the easel. I'm sorry, she whispered to Evelyn to the others. She lit the match. The flames caught fast, leaping like wild beasts across the wooden floor. The heat rose violently, suffocating. The canvas curled and blackened, and Elena watched her own face distort in the fire, melting, twisting, screaming silently. She turned and ran. Smoke swallowed the corridor behind her. As she stumbled down the stairs, flames chased like hounds. Portraits on the walls shrieked without sound, faces contorted in agony. She burst out into the night, coughing and covered in soot. From the lawn, she watched Belmore House burn. The roof collapsed inward with a thunderous groan. Glass shattered in deafening bursts. Smoke poured into the sky like the breath of angry spirits. And then, a final scream, inhuman, ancient, ripped through the night, louder than thunder. Then silence. And dawn. The weeks that followed were a blur of headlines, investigations, and interviews. Historic Belmore House destroyed in mysterious fire. Local artist found in ruins with unfinished painting. Curator declares loss a cultural tragedy. But Elena knew better. What had been lost wasn't culture. It was a prison. And the flames had freed more than she could understand. Though the official report cited faulty wiring, she never corrected them. Who would believe the truth? That souls had been trapped in oil and canvas, and that she had watched them burn to dust? After weeks in recovery, Elena finally returned to her flat in Brighton. Everything felt smaller, quieter, safer. She painted again, but it was different now. The faces she captured were full of joy, defiance, warmth. They were not haunted. She refused to let fear dictate her brush. One morning, as spring crept into the city, a letter arrived. No stamp. No return address. Just her name. Inside was a single photo. Evelyn, smiling, not in paint, but in life. Standing beside another young woman with a familiar face. Elena squinted, realizing it was the same woman from the first painting she had seen in the locked studio. The woman with the sad eyes. And behind them, a third woman. Barely visible. Watching from a distance. The image felt impossibly real, like a glimpse into something still unfolding. Beneath the photo, in neat script, was a line. Not all things stay burned. Not all stories end when the flames go out. Elena looked out the window. The world bustled on, unaware, uninterested in what had passed. But for Elena, life would never be the same. She kept the photo in her sketchbook, nestled between blank pages waiting for new stories. She didn't know who had sent it, or how the women in the photo had found peace. But she hoped they had. And if not, she would paint them one day. Not to trap them, but to remember, to honor, to finish what the fire had started.